So I'm Loretta Jaunzarins. Most of you know me, and I'm one of the pastors at Trinity Lutheran Church. Ellen and I have been working with, Ellen is founder of Aging Together, which morphed into Hamilton Aging and Community a few years ago. And I joined this little grassroots organization probably 6 or 7 years ago now. And Ellen and I have been doing a lot of webinars and in-person teaching sessions when we, pre-COVID times. And so it's great to do this session on ethical wills and legacy letters, something that Ellen introduced to me about 5 years. So Ellen, I'll get you to introduce yourself. Ellen, you're muted.
I'm Ellen Ryan, Professor Emeritus from McMaster. In my professional work, I focused in the later years in particular on aging issues, starting before I had gray hair. And people would say, why are you studying such a topic? And I used to say, well, someday it's going to be relevant. Well, the someday has arrived. In retirement, one of my focuses has been an emphasis on mutual support. And we founded Hamilton Aging and Community to create a mutual support group and to spread the word about positive aging, about resilient aging, and help people identify ways to create community. And the special interest is in housing alternatives. So I'm part of Co-Housing Hamilton, which many of you will know about, where we've created an intentional community and looking for land who plan a project to live together, small private space, large communal space. And part of my emphasis within Hamilton Aging and Community has been teaching about memoir, and that relates to legacy letters and ethical wills. And I really look forward to working with Loretta again.
Me too, Ellen. It's always a joy. So just a reminder, this is being recorded and we will send it around for people. If you don't want your face to be shown, just turn off your video and please have yourself muted. Again, use the chat function to put any questions in or have them ready. There'll be times for question and answer. We're going to be doing some exercises, so that will also be our break time if you need to get another coffee or go to the washroom. And of course, have pen and paper or computer ready to take any notes and to do the exercises as well. So we're going to begin with the land acknowledgement, and this is the one from the city of Hamilton. The city of Hamilton is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. We further acknowledge that this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. So I'm just going to stop share for a moment. So I'm going first with the presentation and then Ellen will do hers. So as I mentioned, Ellen introduced me to ethical wills and legacy letters in a session that we held about 5 years ago. So it was a small group of us that gathered one evening at my former church, Grace Lutheran. And Ellen talked about writing a legacy letter to a loved one. And I taught the group how to make an envelope into which you put your letter. So it would be a whole package of love from you to the person. So I entitled mine, My Wish List for Liam, who is my one and only grandchild, a grandson. And I put it in the envelope and I've held on to it since then. Now, I wrote that when he was 3.5 and he is now 9. So I'm still thinking about, okay, do I give him this before I die or after I die? So I've still got it. I'm still thinking about it. And sometimes, that'll be your experience. What I find so intriguing or drawing about ethical wills and legacy letters is that they can take any form. They can be written as a letter or a poem. They can be voice recorded or a video recording. I recently came across a poem by the late Mary Oliver that I thought could easily be a legacy letter. And I'm going to share it with you. And what I like about this poem is that she confronts death head on with grace, beauty, and curiosity. No fear. She calls us to experience everything that life has to offer. Oops. So it's called When Death Comes. When death comes like a hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut. When death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea. And I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does toward silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was a bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. While Mary Oliver can so well express her thoughts in poetry, I believe we are all gifted to put on paper the values we want to leave for our families. From what I've read, ethical wills have been around for a long time in the Jewish tradition. Parents would write a letter in which they sum up all they have learned in life. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I can imagine that the late Queen Elizabeth wrote down her values on the monarchy and passed them on to her son, Charles. And just as Elizabeth had done in her first speech at age 21 and expressed her values for her life and the monarchy, Charles did the same after her death. We don't have to be a queen or a king or a prime minister to pass on values or wisdom. We can all pass on values through a letter to our children or our grandchildren. So we find the first ethical wills in the Bible. That's a source for them. So in Genesis 49, if you remember any of these biblical characters, Jacob, who was the son of Isaac and Rebekah and grandson of Abraham and Sarah, he gathers his children around his bedside and he says to them, "Gather around, that I may tell you what will happen to you in the days to come." What Isaac said to each of his sons is thought to be one of the first known oral ethical wills. Also in the Bible, we read that Moses makes a farewell address to his people before he dies. King David prepares his son Solomon before he dies by asking him to complete the task he had begun and was unable to complete, and warning him at the same time whom to watch out for when he becomes king. Fast forward a few dozen centuries, we, or someone, not me, but there is this document from Eleazar the Levite, written about 1357, to his family. And he said, "Judge every person charitably and use your best efforts to find a kindly explanation of conduct, however suspicious. Give in charity an exact tithe of your property. Never turn a poor person away empty-handed. Be not as dumb cattle that utter no word of gratitude, but thank God for his bounties at the time at which they occur. And in your prayers, let the memory of these personal favors warm your hearts. When the words of thanks occur in the liturgy, pause and silently reflect on the goodness of God to you that day." So he's telling his family members many things, many of his values in here, especially when it came to acts of charity, and to always be thankful for what we get, and to thank God as well, because he believed God was good to us every day. So ethical wills and legacy letters have been found written by many kinds of people in many countries. They are all precious spiritual documents, a window into the soul of the person. They are heartfelt messages that maintain their relevance no matter who the person was or when they lived. An ethical will means passing on your spiritual legacy to your family. It's your personal mission statement, the values and virtues that have made your life worth living. One of the books I really liked that I read was this one called, by Rabbi Stephen Leader, called "For You When I Am Gone." And it's on the resource list that we're going to hand out to you at the end. But, on the back of the dust jacket, there's always people commenting on them, on the book. And one of them is Michael Curry, who's the presiding bishop and primate of the Episcopal Church in America. So this book is by a Jewish rabbi, and this is Michael Curry from the Episcopal Church in America, just overwhelmed by it. He wrote, "I've changed my will because of this book. I don't necessarily mean the will with instructions for the disposition of my earthly possession. I mean the will composed not by a lawyer, but by my life. The legacy of the love, the values, the virtues that make life worth living. A life lived like that can create beauty even in the valley of the shadow of death. I cried, I laughed, my heart sang. Now death, where is your sting?
That's a lovely quotation.
It's beautiful. And one of the apps I'll talk about apps. But one of them I got is called We Croak. We all croak, right? And it's a frog on it. And I think it's from Buddhism. It says, in order to be happy, you have to think about death 5 times a day. So don't go through life not thinking that you're ever going to die, because if you think that way, you won't live your life the way you should be living your life. So I get this app, it's called We Croak. And 5 times a day, I get a little quote. And this time it says, insofar as one denies what is, one is possessed by what is not, the compulsions, the fantasies, the terrors that flock to fill the void. So if we don't think about our mortality, we have, our life is filled with or possessed by compulsions, fantasies, and terrors. So I get these 5 times a day and I'm like, whoa, okay. That's something's making me think. And they come from all different faith backgrounds. So Ellen asked me to list out some of my key values and some stories to go with them. And you really have to think about them. And this is, as we were talking before we started, you could write forever. You know, it can, so this is what I'm presenting is just a few short values. And what I've done is I've bolded the action words to remind me to put my values into action. You can have all these values, but if you're not putting them into action, they're not of much value. So anyway, what's been very important to me throughout my life is to seek justice and equality for all. So I'll tell you a little story. In 1976, when I was 22 years old and working as a registered nursing assistant, joining the union, QP, was part of my employment contract. You worked at this hospital, you became a member of QP. I had never had, being only 22 years old, any union experience before. But it was here at this hospital under QP that I learned that men in 1976 automatically got more pay than women, just automatically. There was no equal pay for work of equal value. It was being discussed and worked on, but there just wasn't. In those days, only women were nurses. And yet the orderlies, who were all men, got paid more than many of the nursing staff, like myself. So as much as I liked the orderlies, I always remember this one, his name was George, and I appreciated their work. I was really outraged when I realized that I was getting paid less, even though I had to go for training. I had to get registered with the College of Nurses. And this man beside me had no training or licensing or expectations, yet he was getting paid more. So that prompted me to become a shop steward. And eventually this inequality was reversed across the province. And I was very proud to have been part of that. I then went to university for my undergrad degree. I was a bit older. I was hoping to become a contract negotiator, but that didn't work out. But it's still, seeking justice and equality for all reminds me to be always speaking up when the situation requires it. Another value of mine is to be reliable and responsible. I think when you make a commitment to someone or something, you need to be reliable and responsible. This especially hit home after I had 2 daughters. I wanted to take parenting seriously. And I remember hearing an interview, this would have been the early 1990s, on CBC radio, that most parents abdicate parenting by the time their first child reaches the age of 12. I was shocked when I heard that. And so I decided then and there that I wasn't going to be one of those parents who abdicate. So I invested my time and energy into my children's lives. And I think that's why I have a close relationship with both of them. And now that I have a grandson, I do the same. And I have shared these values with my daughter and her husband, my son-in-law. And this is what I say to them. Make sure you show up for his life. Show up for his life, especially when he's young. The third one is to be loyal and generous with your time and assets. So my mother did a lot of volunteer work when I was growing up. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she volunteered. She had the time to volunteer. But it was never a value that was discussed. It wasn't presented as a value. It was something you did. So I saw it in action. And as I grew up, I was called on by my mother to help. And I did so basically without complaining. As I got to my mid-teens, volunteering at the church in the choir, playing piano, teaching Sunday school, driving seniors just became part of my week. So I taught my daughters that giving back to the community through their church or another organization should be something they do and they plan for. The next one is seeking spirituality. Now, I was raised in a conservative religious household where church attendance, prayer, and Christian music were very important. While I don't think or practice the beliefs of my parents, spirituality is very important to me. It's something I seek after on a daily basis. The other thing is connecting with creation. My parents loved to garden. They had flowers. We lived in West Toronto. There were flowers and fruit trees, vegetables, and grapevines. My father would take me out into the garden and show me how to graft between the fruit trees. So you can mix them up. He taught me that. And I've been gardening ever since. We spent a lot of time camping, hiking, cross-country skiing, making a fire out in the woods in the winter and cooking our lunch. In the 1960s, there were still lots of green spaces around Toronto where you could just find a river and do some fishing and cook up a shore lunch. In the summer, I went to Latvian camp that had an outdoor chapel. That was my first time being introduced to an outdoor chapel. And while these were Lutherans, we were also taught ancient folklore and practices that included our connection with nature. So these are just a few things that, when I was thinking about myself and my values, I would say the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values, lots more. So now I'm going to show you a video. And this comes from a website called Tree of Life Legacies. And they specialize in video legacy letters and ethical wills. So if you go on their website, there's all kinds of them, even for businesses and corporations to leave an ethical will. So when I saw that, I thought, well, probably Walt Disney left something for his company of how he wanted his legacy to be continued. Or I'm sure you can think of some companies as well where people wanted to pass on and tell you to carry on. But this one that I'm going to show you is a personal one, and from a father to his sons. And let's hope I can get it. Just give me a second.
Hi, Finn and Matt. I just wanted to share with you a lesson that I learned from having cancer.
Yes.
And, that you guys were there also for my cancer, which is cured now, which is wonderful to be cured. But I really learned a lot about patience from this. That you want things to be fast, and you want things to be over with quick, and you want results to happen fast, and you can't always get that. You can't always get exactly what you want. Sometimes you just got to sit back and let things happen and be positive and be surrounded by loved ones and know that it's going to be okay. And if there's anything that I want you guys to take away from that, it's just in life, that's how it works. That you have to be willing to like just give it up sometimes and just say, you know what? In the end, I know this is going to work, but right now, I just got to sit back and go, this is okay, where I'm at right now. And just know that everything's going to be okay, and that's what I really want for you guys to come away with, that everything's going to be okay, and that I love you guys.
So a bit of a tearjerker, but a young father telling his young sons what he learned from his experience with cancer, and that's patience. Nothing happens quickly overnight, and a really great message for them. So, our ethical wills or legacy letters reflects our personality, what's important to us. Everybody's is different. Nothing's right, nothing's wrong. It's just about digging deep into yourself and getting things out on paper or a video or a voice recording, any of those things. So
I've already mentioned that my background is in psychology of aging, and another focus was aging with spirit, and that's where obviously Loretta and I connect so well. And in my retirement, I've been working on writing memoir and teaching about it. There are many terms for positive aging. I really like the term resilient aging, because it emphasizes the positive impact of our life experience. My definition is using the ups and downs of life to adapt well to age-associated changes. And that relates to the work we're doing in thinking about ethical will and legacy letters, because we're doing life review. Life review is seen to be a natural part of the aging process. And life review builds resilience as we explicitly harvest our lessons. So we've learned these lessons, but when we explicitly harvest them, they become a better part of our coping with everyday life now and with our future, as we were just talking, sparked by Barb's comments. And sharing our life lessons, which we do in the ethical will legacy letters. Sharing our life lessons builds resilience among our loved ones and spreads farther into the community. So it's a way of contributing in our later years to future lives and to, as the many indigenous people say, to the 7th generation. Daniel Taylor has a book, and we've got his book on our resource list, Creating a Spiritual Legacy, with a lot of stories and good ideas for you and me. And he has this quote that we establish wills to pass on our possessions and property to family members and friends. But what about the things that really matter? Our legacy letters, our ethical wills, pass on our values, beliefs, wisdom, and stories. And why do we do this? A couple of quotes addressing that. If youth is the season of hope, it is often so only in the sense that our elders are hopeful about us. And this kind of hope is especially important in these days when the talk about climate change, the realities of climate change, can lead to despair, in a sense that it doesn't matter how we behave anymore, because the survival of humanity is in such question that it's up to us elders to pass on hope to the next generations. And Marian Edelman wrote, "Remember your roots, your history, and the forebear shoulders on which you stand, and pass these roots onto your children and to other children, spreading, taking those legacy lessons that we inherited, as Jim mentioned earlier, and put them in a form where they can be passed on to our loved ones and other generations." Judith Favor did a workshop with practice and spirituality in August, and Loretta and I took that workshop 4 different weeks on writing legacy letters to prepare for this activity and our future work with ethical wills and legacy letters. And this is one of the quotes that Judith pulled out from the book Hearts on Our Sleeves, a recent book written by Elaine Voci. And she wrote in 2 different parts of her introduction, 2 different messages describing the purpose of her life and the purpose of writing this book. "I am the voice of the elder. I am an aging woman with silver hair. I am a nona, a grandmother to 5. I am a wife, a sister, a cousin, and a friend. Of all the tools I use in crafting my art as a writer, a coach, and a celebrant, I have but one universal purpose: to inspire, to show another way of understanding, to encourage, and to leave the world a better place than when I found it. Simple, sincere service." And so that's an example of a very brief statement of legacy. And here's another: "A rich, full life is not measured by monetary or material things. What we grow to treasure by the time we are 60 is our spiritual growth, our awareness of what is precious in life, our abilities to feel gratitude, and to express kindness and love." So what I'm trying to do is give you lots of examples, as Loretta was doing, of what we can do. It's hard to know which button is going to make the slide change. There we go. Loretta showed you her current favorite book by Steve Leader, and my current favorite book is Writing Legacy Letters by Rachel Freed. It's very practical, and we'll be offering 4 sessions on to get practice, for all of us to get practice in writing legacy letters, and Rachel Freed has a very nice template for that. She also is from the Jewish tradition. Writing your ethical will, she calls that legacy letters or gratitude letters. And her expertise is in showing us how to do letters we can send now rather than waiting till we die or collecting them for when we die, but to specific individuals, writing stories that relate to those specific individuals. writing your ethical will, she says, is what life learnings, personal philosophies, mottos, and core values do you want to leave as legacy to your descendants? And then suggest telling the stories of how you learned these lessons or acquired these philosophies. So she is focused on going beyond making lists of our values, but anchoring them in stories. Loretta will laugh at this, but there was a time when I was asked, well, I created an opportunity to write for an Aging in Spirit a publication, my views of aging with spirit. And I had this idea in the beginning that I would write 3 or 4 pages, which would capture everything I had learned about aging with spirit. And as I tried to work on it, it got more and more abstract. And I realized, as all preachers know, but it took me a while to learn, that if you spout a bunch of abstractions that you have carefully sifted down from your elaborated life experience, then they mean a lot to you, but they don't mean much to the person receiving them. That people receiving them get abstract values through story. And I ended up writing that article about my friend Naomi Wingfield, who at the time was about 100. She died at almost 102. And she was my elder, teaching me lessons about how to age with spirit. So by telling the story of what I was learning from my best friend, I was able to get across a number of the abstract messages that I had tried to, and realized that, you know, no one 3-page article is going to do it, that I needed to keep writing. I prepared you for Rachel Fried's template. And what she suggests is that you choose a story and a recipient. Sometimes the recipient comes first. If you want to write to somebody for her 80th birthday, for an anniversary, you want to write to a couple. It could be that your children's 25th wedding anniversary, for example, or you have a 16-year-old who's having an elaborate party for her 16th birthday, and you realize you could take a story of when you were a teenager and use that as a core to write a letter to of congratulations to your 16-year-old granddaughter. So she suggests you have a story and a recipient in mind, and you can work through a 4-part structure. So for example, if my granddaughter actually is going to be 16 in December. So if I was going to write a letter to Kayla, then the context would be, oh, Kayla, it's your 16th birthday, and I wanted to send you something about myself when I was a teenager. And that could be as simple as that, or it could be several paragraphs. And then I would choose a story. I'm going to tell you about a car talk story, and maybe that's one that I would choose, about having a conversation with my father and how it became a turning point for me. So I might tell the story, how it was a turning point for me and the learning I got out of it, and then a blessing. So now on your 16th birthday, this is what I wish for you. And I find that 4-part structure allows people in 20 minutes to sketch out a letter, which they can later turn into something they would actually send. And this is an example of how you can use family photographs to come up with stories and values. So this is a photograph of my father standing on the left with his 4 brothers and his father. He had already left for the lumber yard, so he was about 14 here. He started work at 13 as a lumberjack, and and saved this picture, which we now have. And what I was able to do with this picture is write about what I know. So I know the names of those that he has two older brothers. He very quickly became the tallest. At this point, he's not the tallest, but soon he would become the tallest and the strongest. He had a strong physique, whereas the other men in his family had weaker physiques, even though they had to work as very young teenagers out in the woods all winter long, as he did. So anyway, I could write about what I know about the relationship between my grandfather and those four brothers. There were also at one point, 6 sisters, and 2 died in childhood, 4 surviving sisters. And as I wrote about this, what I know and what I don't know, where was my grandmother and what had happened to the daughters, etc. And how is it that that suit still fits my father after he'd been working in the woods and become so muscular and that kind of thing, wondering about various things. Then I identified a value and a story to talk about my father. The value is family closeness. So even though starting at 13, each of these, the older 3 boys went out to the woods and they stayed together, certainly while my father was 13, 14, and 15, he was able to be with his older brothers. After that, he was more on his own. That the value was family closeness. And the story, and it quite surprised me that the story I realized as I was writing is my father. I knew my father as a man, very much a man of the family. And yet I started to think about, well, he left home to work at 13. He didn't live within a couple of hours of any of his siblings until he was in his 40s. And then only briefly. I realized that one of the reasons he would have chosen my mother as his wife was she was nestled in a very, not as large a family, but very tight family with very much like the family I married into in the Ryans. Lots of siblings. The grandparents had lots of siblings, and they were dispersed an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours away, and would gather often. And very close connection between my mother's parents and her 2 brothers and their families. So what I realized is that in thinking about that photograph and what I knew about my father's early life is that he chose a wife for whom family closeness was a priority, and he made family closeness a priority in raising his kids. As Loretta said, he made the commitment to be there for his kids, even though he worked long hours and went to school for most of the others. We always knew where his priority was. And as I'll continue talking about my father, this is a poem, excerpts from a poem. I don't want to take too long with it, but this is a description of my experience. I had 1 year at university. My parents came to visit. My mother was doing something with other mothers, and I went out to talk to my dad was getting something from the car, and he was just going to wait in the car till my mother was finished. He spent a lot of his life waiting in the car till my mother was finished talking. I sat down in the car with him, and we didn't go anywhere, but I was alone with him in the copper-toned Chevy. After months away from home, I'd lost my certainty. At 18, needed you to make things right. I'm not sure, Dad, about this dogma. Not so sure we Catholics have all the truth, nor we Americans. Can you pull me back where I was? Lift me back to my comfortable seat in the car, heading toward the future. Show me which route to take. Thank God, I heard, you're beginning to grow up. So bright, and yet I worried, would you ever learn to navigate the roads of life? That was a real turning point. I was so confused by having all my certainty shaken up with a little bit of university life. And I went to my rock, to my anchor, and he said, oh, thank God you're starting to have doubts. That's growing up. And so he opened the door for me to go through university, changing my major every month and changing my ideas every month, but realizing just hold on to those ideas and learn how to hold even contradictory ideas in mind. And that's a poem I wrote 20 years ago. And in the meantime, relatives have used it with their adolescent kids to help them when they start to grow up in this way. And that's a poem I would share with my grandchildren as they become old enough. And continuing at the theme of my dad, which the day he died was a turning point for me. And 4 or 5 years later, I was starting to learn to write poetry. And one of my values is to live in mystery and not try to figure things out. And that was especially important to me when I was able to write this poem. So the experience happened about 5 years earlier, but I felt I had sort of graduation from my first year of trying to write poems when I could write this poem commemorating that experience I'd had. The day Dad died, someone making coffee, lists, phone calls. Yesterday's completed crossword puzzle beside library books marked in progress. Jars of crabapple jelly on the counter. First time experimenting in red and gold. Garden gray and November bleak, plants shrunken into earth. Yet on the anniversary rosebush, barren all summer, 2 yellow blooms. So this was a feeling of my parents' resurrection on the day my dad died. And it's such a gift to be able to have written something like that. And when I was able to write that poem, I felt very connected to my sense of divinity. And I continue to have that feeling as I've worked on writing legacy letters and memoir, that kind of thing, that this kind of spiritual reflection is good spiritual work. Now, we had some conversation earlier about how this might, the benefits of writing spiritual legacy ethical wills would be for ourselves, not only the receivers. And I've got a summary here that comes from Daniel Taylor's book. Stories preserve your life. There's the power and pleasure of remembering. There's also a certain amount of agony, but hopefully one, as you remember failures or what it was like to be a teenager or what it was like after loss, etc. But resilience is coming through that and coming through by recognizing the lessons learned. No matter how terrible, here you are, a survivor with lessons to pass along. And you come to a better understanding of your own life and its significance, and often a better understanding of your parents' lives, of your grandparents' lives. Many of the legacies, we resisted legacies from our parents and earlier ancestors at various times in our younger lives. And now we can go back to those and have greater understanding of where those came from, and perhaps a sense of how we shouldn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And also with 60 more years of experience, we can see the values within those values. And the blessing, it's very much, we'll have a feeling of the blessing of having gifts for the younger people in our lives. It's, on certain days, you find yourself in corresponding with somebody, saying just the right thing in an email, or on the phone saying just the right thing. This is a chance of collecting your just the right things, your best gifts for others. And there's a great sense of accomplishment and gratitude for that, even in the process, as well as when you're able to hand over something. And the benefits for the receiver are to enjoy the family story. of being seen, especially when you send these legacy letters. When I say to Kayla, I want to write to you today on your birthday, not just platitudes, but I want to write you something that's coming from my depths, or to say to one of my own children, or to my nephew, or to the young neighbor who's having a difficult time. If I have something to say, then the fact that I'm writing to them gives them a feeling of being seen, of being known, of belonging to the human family, if not the individual family or neighborhood or community. And the receiver gets an understanding of their own family history and an understanding of themselves. So for example, the Ryans side of our family is very musical. I am not, and my daughter didn't know till she was reading some of my memoir proofreading for me, that I grew up in a very musical family as well. She didn't know that. My mother played piano, and my father's family, in all the gatherings, there would be French Canadian fiddle playing and guitar and singing in a couple languages, etc. So somehow I know I've mentioned that in the past, but you know how we don't listen to our elders until we're older. So the one big advantage of having this, you might share some of this now, send these legacy letters to individual people, but save them all for later, because people are not ready at young ages for the lessons their elders are passing on. The advantage of writing them as opposed to just saying them is they'll be there a long time till the recipients are old enough to understand or take them seriously or see them in a new light. And then there's transfer of wisdom across the generations, and the receivers receive resources for their own living, right? I really like that summary that was offered by Daniel Taylor. And this is a list which will be in the recording, and you can stop the recording and look at this. These are a list of questions that come from Leader and Shapiro, asking those spiritual questions. Who am I? Where do I belong? What do I care about? And what is my purpose? And you can do free writing, or what Judith Faber calls discovery writing. Just take one of those questions and fill pieces of paper with answers. And those questions can help you find your stories and values. And I'm a lover of quotations. My memoir will be filled with quotations. My legacy letters will be filled with quotations. And I just wanted to mention how they can be helpful, as you might include them, or you might use them to write with and to spur you to have a story. This is a quotation. I do a lot of listening overnight to podcasts, and I heard this poem just before my alarm rang this morning, and I remembered enough that it was Jericho Brown about hope, and I was able to find this quotation from Poetry Magazine. Hope is the opposite of desperation. It's not as comfortable as certainty, and it's much more certain than longing. It is always accomplished by the imagination, the will to see what our physical environment seems to deem impossible. Only the creative mind can make use of hope, and only a creative people can wield it. Hope is one of my values, and as you'll see, I've got too long a list of values, so I'm still working on a huge long list. But today's quotation really hit me, and also creativity is one of my values. So I might only keep for my legacy letter, only the creative mind can make use of hope. Only a creative people can wield it. So I might just hold on to those two lines. I mentioned Judith Faber, her workshops in August. One of the things she started to do as she started to teach us was create an alphabetical list of her values. And I'm taking advantage of that, but she's doing it in a different way. She has a word for every letter of the alphabet. She allows herself to have duplicates. And she goes on, she has 34 in her list. And some of them are nouns, and some are verbs, and some are phrases. And some of them you would expect faithfulness, blessing, courage, enthusiasm. But she has some that probably seem odd to you, like dying as a value, burying, makes you curious. You want to go look what's there. And grounding and hugging. So you can see that there's quite a variation in the expectedness of these. So the goal is to get ones that are really yours, and finding your words. So I use this as a kind of starting point, the idea of having an alphabetical list. And this is mine in progress. And I'm just putting them in alphabetical order. I'm not worried. I'm not going to try to get one that starts with D and one that starts with E, etc. But it gives me an order. It would be very difficult for me at this point to sift out what the most important are. And so putting them in alphabetical order allows me to write whatever I like. And some of these are probably more expected for standard than others. So I, for example, have resilience. You know that I would put resilience given what I've told you already, and I've prepared you for mystery for me and for creativity. Which word you pick is real challenge. So for me, there's awe, wonder, nature. I don't know whether to pull out nature as a separate one or to keep it under awe and wonder. Mystery, open-hearted seeking, interfaith orientation. I'm not sure how to put all that together either. But what I've done in the last 2 months is create one document, which is about 12 pages long, which has headings, all these headings. And then when I find a good quote, I put them under. And of course, it's hard to know where to put the quotes because they fit in several different places. But because this is all tentative, I don't need to worry. I just put it someplace. And I've been trying to think of stories. So I have a creativity story. I have a friendship story. I have a practice story. I have a mystery story. I have a listening story. I have a pause. Pause is very important for me because you may have noticed I talk really fast and I am talking much slower than I used to. I'm a person who has traditionally rushed about and then collapsed. And it's only in my later years I've learned how challenging it must have been for my husband to live with this rushing person all the time, not to mention my kids. Being with a rushing person is wearing. And I cannot slow down the pace of my sentences, but I have learned to pause between the sentences. And I've also learned to pause when I'm starting to panic. When I have too many things to do, like the last 2 days, I have 2 more important activities after this workshop today. When I have too many things to do, I can easily get into panic mode. And I can't stop the panic, but I can pause and reset. And that practice has been very important for me. So in any case, I'm just giving you a taste, and I see we're running out of time. So I just want to stop end by reading this, which I also just added today. I have it in my memoir slides, but realize it's really a lovely base for a blessing. The blessing that one would give at the end of the ethical will. What are your hopes for the future? Or at the end of each legacy letter, may you, what I hope for you will happen, whatever. And I realized that I can read Rabbi Baskin's message here. Many of you will know that he wrote for The Spectator for 60 years. He's 97 now, lives in Toronto. He moved there recently from Hamilton, where he was rabbi emeritus for 30 years. He wrote many, many religious articles, spiritual religious articles for The Spectator. And in one of them, he says, and I'm going to say it as a blessing, may you live, and I could really see myself doing this for my children. May you live all the days of your lives, keeping your hearts alive, deepening compassion, adding to your friendships, retaining a buoyant enthusiasm, and growing more sensitive to the beauty of the world and to the wonder at the miracle of being a part of it. I think that would make a very beautiful blessing to put at the end of a legacy letter.